Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're focusing on a sound so specific, so iconic, that whole genres of music were basically built on top of it. We were talking about that deep, wet, metallic splash, that vintage spring reverb sound you hear when the needle drops on, old instrumental rock. Our mission today is simple, but it's also pretty challenging. We're doing a deep dive on the BOSS FRV 163 Fender Reverb. It's this compact pedal that was designed to capture what many call the holy grail of reverb, the outboard spring unit from 1963. We're going to analyze the physics and the really advanced modeling that went into shrinking that massive tube-driven tank sound into a little yellow box, and also why this specific pedal became such a cult classic.
Right. And I think it's absolutely essential to first establish why that original 1963 unit has this holy grail status. I mean, it's not just famous because it used springs. Lots of vintage amps had spring reverb built in.
Yeah, that was pretty standard.
What made the 63 outboard unit so different was that it was a dedicated system. It had its own preamp section, and that dedicated preamp is really the secret sauce. The guitar signal hits a tube circuit before it even excites the spring pan. This combination, it gives you way more than just a long decay. It gives you these very specific characteristics.
Okay, like what?
Like tube-driven compression, which kind of squashes and thickens the front end of the note. You get that deep, splashy tone, the metallic decay, and crucially, what players call the drip.
The drip, yes. It's a sound that's so hard to describe if you haven't heard it, but once you do, it's unmistakable. It's that kind of distinctive, high-frequency, almost percussive clang or a thwack that happens right when your pick hits the string.
Exactly. It's the upper mid transient frequency being amplified, compressed, and then immediately followed by the specific decay of the springs. The drip is the sound of physics happening in real time. It's a whole sonic signature, not just an effect you layer on top.
Okay, so let's unpack this. If that whole sound relies on big vibrating metal springs, vacuum tubes, transformers, all these real physical things, how on earth did BSS and Fender shrink that into a compact stomp box back in 2009? I mean, that sounds like trying to square the circle.
It definitely required a huge technical pivot. Right. And the first really interesting piece of the puzzle is the collaboration itself. The FRV-1 is an officially Fender licensed model.
Ah, okay.
This is key. According to our sources, this is the only compact pedal ever made with Fender's blessing to emulate this specific 63 unit. They were basically endorsing the accuracy of the model.
That gives it a ton of credibility right out of the gate. But the tech they used was BSS's own thing, right? The Composite Object Sound Modeling, or KOSM. We hear that term a lot, but what is it actually doing here?
That's a great question, because if you think about most modern high-end digital reverbs, they often use impulse responses, or IRs.
Right.
An IR is like a sonic snapshot. It captures the decay of a specific room or a spring tank at one single moment in time. It's fantastic for capturing static ambience.
But the 63 tank is anything but static. It's dynamic. It reacts.
Precisely. The COSM engine doesn't just model the sound of the springs, it models the physical behavior of all the components. So it's modeling the mechanical resonance of the three-spring pan, the tube driver stage that hits those springs, the non-linear compression of the preamp.
And how they all interact when you really dig in and play hard.
Exactly. It's like if you were modeling a violin, an IR models the sound it makes when bowed, but COSM tries to model the wood density, the string tension, and how the bow actually interacts with the strings.
That gives such a huge insight into why this pedal has that vintage character. Because you're not just getting the reverb tail, you're getting the thick front-end coloration and that specific, slightly grainy top end from the tube preamp before the signal even gets processed digitally.
You've got it. The COSMN model captures the tube coloration and even the inherent tone loss that happens in old gear. That grainy, slightly noisy character isn't a flaw in the pedal.
It's a feature.
It's an intentional feature to make it sound authentically vintage. And that is so crucial for capturing the feel of the original.
So the compression isn't just an effect added after the reverb. It's modeled as part of the driver circuit itself.
Correct. It captures those essential preamp compression characteristics that make the reverb just sit so perfectly in a mix. It even models the low-end thump you get from the resonance of the actual physical spring pan. It ensures that when you hit a chord, the whole modeled mechanism reacts, not just the decay.
So if the model is built on physics, the controls should logically mirror that physical interaction. And they do. The layout is super simple, just like the original 63 unit. Dwell, tone, and mix.
They mirror the originals, yeah. But understanding what dwell actually does is, well, it's paramount here. It's the most expressive control by far.
Okay, let's focus on dwell. Because in most reverb pedals, you get decay time, or maybe input volume. What is dwell doing in this very specific modeled vintage context?
Dwell controls how hard the springs are hit.
Oh.
So think of it as controlling the input level of the signal that's driving the spring pan's transducer. And because this is modeling a tube circuit, turning up the dwell means you're driving that modeled tube preamp harder.
Which means more saturation and compression.
Exactly, which in turn leads to a more intense, a louder, and a longer decay.
So it's the gateway to chaos.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what those vintage surf players were after. You can just hear the massive tonal shift depending on where that dwell knob is set.
Absolutely. You set the dwell low, you get a light controlled reverb tail. Just a subtle ambience, maybe. Perfect for, adding some texture to clean jazz or classic blues. Minimal splash.
But mid-dwell, that's where the magic lives, isn't it?
That's the sweet spot for a lot of people. Mid-dwell gives you that classic surf drip and a warm decay. That's the signature sound of the Ventures or Dick Dale. The compression is active, the drip is pronounced, but it's still, relatively manageable.
And if you crank it, what happens when you just dime the dwell control?
Then you are pushing those modeled tube stages way into saturation. You get what our sources describe as an explosive, long, almost chaotic crash behavior. And it is glorious. The whole signal becomes saturated, the drip turns into a waterfall, and the decay gets unruly. That behavior, that inability to stay clean when you push it, that's what makes the pedal feel so authentic.
Unruly is the perfect word. It's the complete opposite of modern, clean digital effects.
Okay, let's quickly clarify the other controls. The tone knob.
The cone control is essentially a tilt EQ, but only for the reverb signal itself.
Oh, that's important. It doesn't affect your dry guitar signal at all.
Not one bit. Only the wet reverb trail.
So anyone listening who might not be familiar with a tilt EQ, what does that mean in, practical terms?
It means that as you turn the knob one way, you're boosting one frequency range while you're cutting the opposite one at the same time. So you turn it left, you cut highs and boost lows, you get a warm, smoky, dark vintage sound. You turn it right, you cut lows and boost highs, and you get that bright cutting surf shimmer.
Perfect for those fast instrumental lines to cut through. For sure. And mix is just the simple wet-dry blend. You can go from a subtle enhancement to a fully drenched surf wash. So to kind of summarize the core tonal profile here, the FRV1 is defined by that iconic surf drip, the metallic overtones on the attack, a really thick-bodied, warm reverb, and this organic, non-linear decay. It always sounds like a real vibrating object, not a computer calculation.
That sound is so specific, but the applications are surprisingly broad, aren't they?
Yeah.
Let's look at the use cases, because this sound lives way beyond just instrumental surf rock. I mean, obviously, surf and instrumental rock is its spiritual home. You think Dick Dale, the Ventures, the Beach Boys, early stuff. The sources all note that it pairs perfectly with single coil pickups and a clean amp to really emphasize that metallic clang in the drip without it all turning to mud.
But then you connect that sound to mood and atmosphere, and suddenly the pedal is essential for cinematic work, especially the soundscapes of the spaghetti western genre.
Yeah, Morricone.
Exactly. That long, mysterious decay and the slightly overdriven, wet character were perfect for those Ennio Morricone-style bids. It adds this vast, dusty sense of space, especially if you pair it with some tremolo. And you really shouldn't overlook its versatility in Americana. For vintage country, rockabilly, even some roots music, the FRV1 adds this lush, almost plate-like twang, but with that splashy attack, it instantly gives you a retro flavor.
What I find fascinating is its use in gritty blues or lo-fi indie rock. Our source material highlights running this pedal before your overdrive, and that gives the distortion a totally different texture. It sounds like the reverb tank itself is rattling along with the riff, which is exactly what those old cranked amps used to do. And thinking about modern recording, the sources specifically mentioned its use for direct-in demos that need done vintage vibes. So for listeners who might not be familiar with recording terms, what does direct-in or DI actually mean?
DI just stands for direct injection. It means you're recording the raw, unamplified signal straight from your guitar into the recording interface.
So very clean, very sterile sound.
Totally sterile. DI tracks lack any coloration, any grit, any ambience. And the fact that this pedal is recommended for injecting a done vintage vibe into a track like that, it speaks volumes. It's providing all the compression, coloration, and mechanical response you need to sound like you were recorded in a specific era, instantly.
This brings us to the cons, or maybe the trade-offs of the pedal. which, as we've sort of established, are really just intentional design choices. This pedal isn't trying to be the cleanest or most versatile reverb out there.
Not at all. The goal is character, not cleanliness. If you're looking for a pristine, hi-fi, ambient wash, this is the wrong pedal. The sources are clear. It is intentionally gritty.
Right. And when players complain that cranking the mix and dwell makes the sound chaotic and uncontrollable, that's not a failure of the modeling.
No, that's a success of the modeling. The real 63 tube unit gets wild and chaotic when you push it that hard. The pedal is designed to replicate the raw limits of the vintage hardware. And it's the same with the fact that it's only mono I/O. It doesn't have modern stereo operation because the original outboard unit was mono. They chose accuracy over modern convenience.
It seems like the biggest criticism, one that's often leveled at BIOS modeling from that era, is that the KOSM engine can sound a bit colored compared to modern digital studio reverbs.
And that's exactly the point. That coloration isn't arbitrary. It's the faithful replication of the original unit's tube tone loss, its preamp characteristics, and the nonlinear interaction with the springs. You are buying a highly specific, intentionally imperfect sound. It's the definition of vintage flavor by design.
Okay, here's where it gets really, really interesting, moving into the legacy of the FRV1. It's just a small, compact pedal, but it managed to achieve this genuine historical and cultural significance.
It was a landmark achievement for BIOS, for sure.
Yeah.
The FRV1 is one of only 3 Fender official BIOS designs ever released.
Only 3? Wow.
That collaboration meant BOSS got access to Fender's historical knowledge and, most importantly, their official stamp of approval. That kind of endorsement is incredibly rare in the very competitive world of pedal emulation.
And that stamp of approval must have given it instant credibility, especially in those notoriously picky surf and vintage guitar communities.
It really did. It quickly became a cult favorite, specifically for its drip authenticity. For many players obsessed with the exact tone of the 63 tank, the FRV1 surpassed a lot of larger, more expensive competitors. It was just seen as the most authentic way to get that sound without shelling out thousands for an original unit and then having to deal with all the maintenance.
So it's considered one of BOS's finest modeling achievements of the 2000s because it prioritized capturing the character and feel of a specific piece of gear. Exactly. It's an example of modeling done right. It focused on the interaction and the flaws, not just the decay time. Unfortunately, for anyone looking for one today, it is discontinued, and it has become quite collectible because of that reputation for authenticity. It just represents this brief, perfect alignment of BIOS, tech, and Fender history. So just to finalize the technical overview for you, this is a spring reverb emulator. It's built on a SiOSM hybrid engine. It has a buffered bypass and mono I/O. Its overwhelming strength is its dedicated focus on delivering that specific thick front-end compression and the true vintage drip of the 1963 outboard unit.
So what does this all mean? I think the FRV1 is just a powerful lesson in intentional imperfection. It's an expressive, lovingly crafted piece of gear that replicates a raw, tube-driven sound. It delivers all that splash, drip, clang, and warmth in a reliable, compact box. It basically gave the world access to a very specific, expensive, and fragile sound.
It really shows the massive value in capturing a specific, flawed, yet beloved vintage tone, rather than just aiming for generic studio cleanliness. When a player stomps on this pedal, they aren't looking for subtle ambience. They're looking to instantly transport their instrument to the sound of 1963. It's a time machine in a box.
And that leaves us with our final provocative thought for you. We talked about how the FRV1 is used to inject that done vintage vibe onto clean DI tracks. But given that this pedal signature involves tube compression and preamp drive, what role might intentional distortion like overdriving the input of the FRV1 play in modern synthetic sound design? Could you use it to turn a sterile digital synthesizer track instantly into something that sounds like it was recorded through a quaint vintage guitar amplifier circuit? Something to chew on. Thanks for diving deep with us.